I am totally convinced that, again, not for the first time, remember, not for the first time, Bashar Assad has used chemical weapons. We don't need UN corroboration, but it'd be nice to have it. The President of the United States over a year ago said that if Bashar Assad used chemical weapons, it crosses a red line. We know for sure that he's used them at least once. Now here's the second time. Horrific, horrific. And if the United States stands by and doesn't take very serious action, not just launching some cruise missiles, then again, our credibility in the world is diminished even more, if there's any left.
And that, of course, Senator McCain. And the question is he right? Is it time for the U.S. to act? And if so, act how? Let's bring in our next guest, Lara Setrakian. She's co-founder and managing editor of Syria Deeply. Lara spent more than 5 years as a foreign correspondent covering the Middle East for various media outlets, including ABC News and Bloomberg Television. And she's kind enough to join us now from London. Lara, thank you.
It's my pleasure.
Speak to what the senator just said there. Did the president inadvertently or intentionally box himself in with the standard he said regarding chemical weapons?
I think he took a deliberate step forward. This has been a policy dilemma that the Obama administration has been facing for at least 18 months. But really, as soon as he came out in August 2011 and said Bashar al-Assad must go, but then with these comments on chemical weapons and the sense that it's really up to the U.S. to display leadership in this conflict and to lead its allies in the Arab world and in NATO to some sort of coherent position. I think there are a lot of significant changes in the U.S. position over the past week, not simply pointing to one case of chemical weapons and saying that this is it, this is the trigger, but also essentially a willingness to sidestep the UN Security Council, to recognize that that governance mechanism is no longer doing its job in the context of the Syria crisis. And the ability to step forward and say, this is the time we're going to step up and rally some kind of response is a significant change.
So speak to that. Let's assume that the Security Council, Russia, China, combination of the two, says no, and we have to take the leadership role. To those who have fatigue after Iraq and Afghanistan and those who see no neat ending to these ongoing conflicts into the Middle East, explain why it's the role or the responsibility of the United States to get involved yet again, even if it's not boots on the ground, if it's military strikes, if it's enforcement of a no-fly zone, if it's some military component. Why is it the job of the United States to do so?
I think the United States is rightfully cautious, doesn't want to make the same mistakes we've made in the past. But it's a very different scenario with Syria. And what we've seen is, while we've been very reluctant as a country to even kind of touch that conflict, because it's so complex and because we're tired of fighting wars in the Middle East, we've seen the situation in Syria and in the neighbors around it deteriorate radically, literally radically. We've seen Syria become a lawless land in the northern parts of the country, Al-Qaeda taking root. We've seen fallout affecting the stability of Jordan, Lebanon, Turkey. Jordan in particular, you look at a country like that, extremely vulnerable as this conflict escalates. As a serious U.S. ally, if Jordan is rendered unstable, that's a serious.
But Lara, the next response will be, if Assad's removed, what's the alternative? Apparently, there's no, as we've learned in Egypt here, there's no nascent government ready to take over. What makes us think the alternative would be any better than even the horrible status quo?
I don't think anyone knows that it would be better, which is partially why the Obama administration has been so reluctant, so circumspect, and even now so keen to say this is about punishing the Assad regime for these chemical weapons, not this notion that it is an attempt to ouster the regime or to take sides and really back the rebels. This is the kind of military operation being talked about is really meant to be punitive and specific to the use of chemical weapons. Now, if it were to trigger any kind of escalation, then it could clearly change the military balance on the ground, and it could create an advantage to the rebel forces. You're nailing it. You're really making a key point here, which is that the rebel side does not have a coherent leadership, does not have a coherent strategy. One could say the guys that we like, the so-called good guys in this fight, the moderate rebels, are at a disadvantage. We didn't back them in a serious way. They didn't get any kind of heavy weapons. They've been outmanned, outgunned, outmaneuvered by the al-Qaeda types, Jabhat al-Nusra. So if Assad were to topple tomorrow, there's no saying that we would see moderates rise to replace him. Very, very strong chance that in those pockets of Syria where you now have jihadi and Islamist elements fully in control, that they would hold on to that terrain. And it's hard to say who would dislodge them.
Lara, I appreciate a few minutes. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
All right, guys. With that a backdrop and clearly no easy answers, Tom, I'll start with you. Where is the line? Let's all establish the U.S. the last military superpower in the world. I think we can look at certain chapters in global history. Certainly, we look at the Holocaust and say, we were right. Okay? Again, the reasons we got in, we were right. That's something that's wrong. We never allow it again. Bosnia, I think we all agree. Okay, we did something, again, maybe too late, but we did something, we did the right thing. But then there's other things, as Richard said, if they gun down people in the middle of the street, why is that different than if they used chemical weapons on them? When is it our fight, and when is it the American national interest versus when it's just bad?
Well, I think Lara just hit the nail on the head. You are now seeing what has happened in Syria cause a domino effect. You are seeing instability in places like Jordan, in Turkey, in Lebanon. Those are bad things for America. Do we care about Israel? This has serious effects on the future of Israel if we allow this to continue. But quite frankly, on a daily basis, I don't care what happens in Syria. I do care when people use weapons of mass destruction, when they use nerve gas to kill their citizens. We have to have some moral authority in this world. We can't allow that to happen for our fellow human beings. I mean, we are one world, right? That's what the president, he's the leader of the world. Well, show some leadership here. You can't let this madman run around and do that.
And to me, I don't think it's more complicated than that. I know it is, but to me, there is a moral authority that comes sitting in the big chair.
That moral authority is to be used when it can be effective. If Lara's dynamic is true, and the net result of this is Syria turns into an al-Qaeda stronghold, that is in the Americans' interest or the interest of the people of Israel or the interest of the people of Egypt? It's not. And if you're going to intervene and help destabilize, or pick a side, better yet, and that side turns out to lose, and the side that wins is infinitely worse, where then the American moral authority? Look, you can these guys criticize Obama for sneezing in the morning. I can't worry too much about it.
To me, this one isn't so much a right-left thing. Richard, I'll be honest with you.
It's who's tough, who's
providing
leadership.
Where's our line?
Rich, there needs to be a penalty for the use of chemical weapons, because otherwise we're basically allowing it to happen.
Okay, I'll go with that. What's the penalty, Andrew?
I'm not sure, and it varies from country to country, because let me hit you with, what if China uses chemical weapons on its people?
Time out, Andrew. The president doesn't have the luxury to not be able to decide. The president's got to decide, to use your words, what the penalty is. So we're doing this. What should the expectation on the penalty
be? In Syria, it may be crippling their ability as best we can to use chemical weapons on their own people going forward.
What does that mean?
That may be surgical airstrikes. I don't know what the military capabilities of Syria are or where their chemical weapons are stashed. But the other example that I offer is, what if China starts using chemical weapons on its people? If all of a sudden we make a blanket statement that we have to invade and regime change any country that's using chemical weapons, we're going to get ourselves in a position where we can't get out.